Hey, friends. This is Martine Williams, and I am obsessed with all things mompreneur life and helping you to remix your priorities, your habits, your mindsets, and yes, even your relationships so that you can build a successful business without losing yourself in the process. I'm also obsessed with the color turquoise and lyrics of the 80s and 90s, but that's beside the point. Girlfriend, you don't have to hustle 24/7, 365 and continue to sacrifice your health, your relationships, and your sanity to be a successful mompreneur. As a small town girl living in a lonely world to a six-figure mompreneur, I am here to teach you how. There is a better way, and this podcast is your one-stop shop for all of the how-tos, the encouragement, the life hacks, the success tips, and of course, a little side of tough love. This is the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. So let's do this. Hey, sweet friends. I am excited for today's podcast. Lots of great information around resiliency and your children, how to help them manage their emotions, get in touch with their emotions. How do you, as a parent, get in touch with your own emotions? Lots of great things. So my guest today is Dr. Kate Lund. Growing up with hydrocephalus took the ordinary out of Kate's childhood. She shares her story about that. She had numerous surgeries, countless doctor's visits, and relentless recovery periods really had become her norm. But through it all, one thing kept her thriving, and the power of resilience in extraordinary circumstances. Building her life around finding incredible possibility on the other side of challenge has kept her driven and ultimately helped her find her true calling. Y'all have heard me say before, I really feel like our past struggles become our present purposes, and she is an example of that. Dr. Lund is a licensed clinical psychologist of 17 years, peak performance coach, best-selling author, and TEDx speaker. Her specialized training in medical psychology includes world-renowned Shriners Hospital for Children, Boston, Massachusetts General Hospital, and Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, all of which are affiliated with Harvard Medical School. She uses a strengths-based approach to help her clients improve their confidence in school, sports, and life by helping them to be more resilient and reach their full potential at all levels. Outside of work, Kate enjoys spending time with her husband and twin boys. She's a boy mom like me, exploring the outdoors of the Pacific Northwest, and these days can often be found on the golf course. You will not be finding me on any golf course. Anyway, great conversation. I know you're going to enjoy it. So get your pen and paper ready or put your earbuds in while you're doing your laundry, whatever it is you do while you listen to this podcast. But you're going to love this episode. And so without further ado, let's do this. Welcome back, friends, to the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. This is Martine Williams, your host and your CEO, your Chief Encouragement Officer. And one of the ways that I have the opportunity to encourage you through these episodes is bringing on Turquoise Talk guests, which are other mompreneurs, entrepreneurs, and just hearing their stories, being inspired by their journey that they have been on and really their expertise in the area that they're in right now in their businesses or in their life. And so I'm super excited to have Dr. Kate Lund. Am I saying that right, Lund?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I forgot to ask you that before we started recording. So I'm really excited to have Dr. Kate here on the show. And so thank you so much for taking the time to share with the audience today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited. So I don't know a lot about you, just what I've read here on your one pager. So tell us a little bit about you, your family, and kind of how you got into the work that you're in today.
Sure, absolutely. So kind of high level, me now, I'm a mom, I'm a wife. I've been married for 25 years.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We have 15-year-old twin boys who keep us on our toes each and every day, different things. They started freshman year this year, so that was kind of a big deal. So we're everywhere. They're both rowers, so they're rowing competitively in different programs. Right. So that keeps us busy. We have 2 dogs. I'm a dog lover.
Okay.
One of our dogs just got registered as a certified therapy dog. So we go out, we visit assisted living facilities and hospitals. He and I do that. It's sort of a passion area of mine. So that's kind of the high level there. I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been a clinical psychologist for close to 20 years. have focused my work primarily with kids and families struggling with medical issues, physical challenges, learning differences, that sort of thing. That sort of area of work has long been a passion for me. And I think my initial interest was sparked by my own experiences with medical illness as a child. I grew up with a condition called hydrocephalus, which means the cerebral spinal fluid isn't circulating as it should. So lots of time in the hospital. The condition is managed with something called a shunt, and the shunt, works really, really well, but occasionally will break. So that means time in and out of the hospital getting that fixed. So it was a big focus of my childhood, and I think really caused me to become interested in how and why folks develop resilience, and sort of sparked a passion in me for helping others to be as resilient and to be able to maximize their potential within their own unique context. Wow. So that was a sort of a long answer to your short question, but that's me in a nutshell.
And I love this because, obviously I'm sure while you were in it, going through that, as a child, it's hard to think of now you're here helping people, but that's what's so important. And what I feel like when we go through challenges, when we get to the other side, or when we're at a place where we can actually reach back, right, and pull someone through that. And I love the work that you're doing, and it's super important. I'm sure you've seen over the last 3 years so much need for this with children, and just all that the world has gone through in the last 3 years. And we probably still don't know the full effects from an emotional standpoint and a resiliency point. So how do you define resilient?
Yeah, and absolutely. That's such a good point about the past 3 years, for sure, because it's been a very challenging time for so many, for all of us, really. It's just been very, very hard. And hopefully we're moving through it, but who knows? It's sort of a gray area at this point. But to be resilient really means that you're able to move through and beyond challenge. You're able to sort of come at an obstacle from another angle, perhaps. If you've tried to circumvent already and it didn't work, you try again. And it's really that sort of ability to problem solve through challenge. And the important thing is you're doing that within your own unique context. So it's not a one size fits all, this ability to move through and beyond challenge, but essentially finding ways that fit who you are and where you are, what your abilities, your aptitudes are, that sort of thing. Really working within your own unique context towards potential as you're faced with challenge.
And so many challenges, right? I mean, I I have 2 boys as well. They're not twins. I didn't want twins initially, but now I'm thankful I didn't get twins. I don't know how my resiliency would have held to the test. But I do have a 15-year-old and I have an 18-year-old. So I have one that's, entering high school and one that's getting ready to exit high school and the home. And so I know that they're both very different. And the way they handle things is very different. The way they respond to things is very different. And there was a situation in one of their lives, and I want to say specifically, where they were, going through an emotional time in middle school with bullying, and I know that's something that you see and that you help people through. And I did have to give him the professional help that he needed, because I, as a parent, didn't have the tools in my toolbox.
Right.
With that. So I know there's probably a mom who's listening right now and who is going through that same thing. And with social media, you just can't get away from it. I mean, it's so hard. I mean, I experienced it growing up, but I could go to my home, my safe place, not have to deal with it really as much at home. But now it's like everywhere for kids.
Yeah. Yeah. The safe place has shrunk, right?
It has. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's hard.
I think, what were the tools, or what are some helpful tools that she could have in her tool belt to help her child who is dealing, maybe not just bullying, but just, again, everything we've gone through in the last 3 years, it's made an impact on her child emotionally. It's made an impact on her, probably. And so she's trying to deal with her own stuff, but now she has a child. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And the point you make about sort of, things impacting the child as well as the parents, because we suffer as well when our child is experiencing a challenge or bullying or anything along those lines. So really important to be, looking at it from that dual perspective. But, in relation to, having a child who's struggling, the first thing we really want to do as parents is we want to sort of try to understand their experience. And of course, this is going to happen on a developmental continuum, but we want to know what's going on for them. We want to know what that experience is as best they're able to articulate it. And, that probably won't happen on our timeline, but to try to create those quiet moments where, which will allow your child, assuming they're developmentally, at the place where they're able to sort of open up and articulate, really just letting your child know that you're there for them and sort of connect with them on a human level. Really, really important. There's some cases where we do need to jump in and become involved in the situation. Like, for example, if the bullying is out of control or, if, so there are moments when we need to intervene, but with sort of lesser challenges or challenges where we think maybe there's benefit in the child sort of problem solving a little bit on their own. And I'm not using bullying as this example because that doesn't fit this category. Right. But, sort of helping our child through that problem solving process with certain challenges is really important. Sharing our own experiences with challenge and being transparent with our kids about the places we've struggled in the past, whether it's been bullying or otherwise, where it's been hard for us, where maybe we've had failures come up. That's really, really important. Because if our children see us as human beings who have also struggled, but also overcome, that's very powerful for them. And then, modeling sort of how we're navigating through our day when a challenge hits is very important. And I feel like as parents, we're best able to model sort of modulated or well-managed stress response by practicing some sort of mindfulness or technique, which will allow us to, manage our stress consistently day in, day out. Mm-hmm. And we want to encourage our kids to do the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's really, really important, because when we're already sort of up here in terms of our stress, I know your listeners can't see, but, and then a challenge hits, will escalate to a point of perhaps possible shutdown. Yeah. So we want to be trying to start from a really modulated or well-managed space. And we want to model that for our kids.
And I think just from my personal experience with my child, sometimes it was really hard. Like I knew some of those things to do and I would try to encourage that, but getting them to actually see the importance, right? And doing those things and doing them consistently enough. And even just the thought of getting some professional help was hard, Yes. I mean, not hard for me because I saw the need, but for them, It felt like, well, what's everybody going to say? I'm like, well, no one has to know.
Right.
It's not a public, like, this is not something we're going to put out on social media. This is a safe place. But so how do you, especially if you're thinking like middle schooler or younger, it's kind of like, well, why do I need to do this? Why is this important?
Right.
It's buy-in in the beginning is hard.
Super hard, and sometimes you're not going to get that buy-in. You're just going to have to take them and then hope that over time, the coach or the therapist is able to connect with them on a human level. And sometimes that takes a long time, before the child will be comfortable or in a position where they'll feel like, or they'll be able to open up. So that's a really important, it's a process that has to unfold on their time. There's some kids who readily come into therapy. They sort of have that sense that, oh, okay, cool. I've got this other person to talk to, but that's not the typical, right? It's usually, the kid's a little bit like, no, this isn't for me. I'm not doing this. And it takes time to, kind of be creative and find that angle to connect with that individual child.
Yeah. Because I've always heard, and I don't know if you agree with this, like you can't force them, into therapy or force them into coaching or into counseling. It has to be their decision.
Right. Their decision, or they at least have to be in a place where they're over some time become willing to engage. Even if they don't love it, become willing to engage. It is true with adolescents, particularly later adolescents. Yes, then it needs to be their decision because, the confidentiality laws and such and all that changes. And so, yes, that then needs to be their decision. But, I've had, this hasn't happened to me per se, but I've had colleagues who have just been, they've said to the parent, like, this isn't working. They're not going to engage here, after a quite a long period of time.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that's just the way it is. And then you hope that you find another angle for the kid to find support. Maybe they play a sport. Maybe their coach acts as a mentor, or maybe there's a teacher they particularly like in a subject that they're, doing very well in, or they enjoy, that kind of a thing, or maybe a drama teacher or a chorus teacher. So helping a child, particularly one who's struggling with anything, but bullying is a great example of this. They're struggling with that perhaps. And then we want to, not minimize the pain of that, not minimize the reality of that, but we want to at the same time help our child to uncover, discover what's unique and what's special about them, and maybe engage in something that's going to help them to build that sense of self, build that sense of belief from the inside out, such that it becomes easier to protect themselves against the insidious nature of bullying.
Right.
It's not something that, wipes out the effect of bullying, but it does help strengthen a child's resolve in terms of, hey, I can do X, Y, or Z, and this is me, and I'm not going to, that becomes easier over time when there is a passion that they're engaged in.
Like finding their thing, right? Their thing that they're good at, their thing that they love to do. And I think, especially from a boy mom, it's like if they're not athletic, right? Or that's not their thing, then it's really easy for the athletic boys to kind of like weasel their way in and speak those untruths to your child, and that was kind of the part of the situation. And I've had this with my friends too, talk about their sons in the same situation. So it is super important. What I've learned is help him find his thing.
Exactly.
What is he confident in, and what does he feel good about? So when they do come, he can say, well, this is what I'm good at. And that doesn't really matter to me. It may matter to you, but it doesn't matter to me.
Right. Exactly.
Time. And you mentioned that, like, for me, I'm such a fixer. Like I want it to be fixed overnight. Right. And it has to be your own time. And that's hard as a mom to sit back and wait for them to come to that place in their own thought life.
So hard. Oh my goodness. I couldn't agree with you more. And, the whole piece about the athletic boys sort of picking on the ones who maybe aren't as athletic. We lived that very scenario as well. And it's very, very hard. And it is true, sort of finding that thing that will help bolster the sense of self is so, so important. It doesn't, wipe out the problem, but it makes it much easier to contend with, for sure.
Yeah. I feel like just in the mental health space in general, one of the blockers I find is that they are afraid of the process of finding the right one,
right.
And how do you know that's the right, counselor or therapist or coach for you? And especially if you're the advocate for your child, and I was thankful the first one was the right one, and it worked out really well. And I really appreciated that she was honest, and she looked my son right in the eye and said, I'm here for you.
Yeah, I love it.
That gave him confidence. It gave me confidence. She's like, I'm not here for her. I'm not here for you. I'm here for you.
Yeah, I love it. Yes.
Yes, it was so awesome. I'm like, you're the one. You're the one,
Yeah.
And she was honest that I'm not going to keep you here if you're doing great, and I don't feel like you need, like, I'm not going to keep taking your money, type of thing.
Yes.
So I think some of those fears are what goes on in a parent's mind or an adult's mind who knows they need the help.
Sure.
But they're afraid to go through that process because it just seems like, oh, what if I have to go through 5 different people and I have to share and spill my guts with 5 different people?
Right.
Too, like, how do you, if someone's listening and they're either it's for their child or for themselves, like, how do you start that process, or how do you get past that block that, oh my gosh, this is going to be a horrible experience. I'm going to have to go through 5 different people till I find the right one, which is the case sometimes.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to, at points, access the services given sort of caseloads being full and all that kind of thing. Virtual care has made that piece easier, particularly in the therapy domain. But yeah, no, it's an important question that you ask. And so, trying to flip that script going into it, realizing it's going to be a process, perhaps, or maybe you'll get a great match the first time out, but trying to embrace the process in it from the perspective of needing to or wanting to find the right match for you as well as your child. Because it is true, I've lived this and the research says it. Therapy, the success of therapy is between, 80 and 90% dependent on the relationship that you have with the therapist. And I fervently believe that. And I've really feel like the strongest relationships I've had with my clients have had, swifter outcomes, right? And so that piece is very, very important to really hone in on the right match and not be afraid to, have another meeting if you feel like, the most recent one felt a little flat, that kind of thing. So trying to embrace it from the perspective of this might be a process. I understand that, but the need for help is real. So might as well dive in, that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Like deciding ahead of time, like what's your mindset going to be going into this process?
Exactly.
Decide that up front.
Because if we can kind of manage our mindset up front going into what we anticipate will be sort of a daunting process, that process will go a lot more smoothly than if we go in with all sorts of blocks and negative thought loops going on. So really managing our mindset around that is vital.
Yeah. Because if we're already telling ourselves it's going to be a horrible process, then our brain's going to help us see the reasons why it's a horrible process.
Exactly. Right? Precisely. It's funny how our brains work.
Yeah. It'll tell you exactly what you're thinking, right? It'll just like confirm what you're thinking out there. It's amazing what our brains do. Hey friend. So you have been trying to make some shifts this year. Maybe you set some resolutions and you're just feeling stuck. You don't feel like you're making progress, or you're just not sure what to do. And you've heard me say this before, but being stuck is a mindset, not a position. And this is where a coach comes in to support you. Because here's what I know to be true about you, friend. If you could have done it alone, you would have already done it, period. And as a life coach and a certified PDP professional, I specialize in using a research-based personality and performance survey called the ProScan to illuminate how your unique personality and natural strengths, your work and life environments are influencing real-time performance. So here's what you need to do. Go to the link in the show notes and book your free clarity call to learn more about how I can support you in your goals. I can't wait to illuminate your strengths, cultivate your confidence, and elevate your life. So why is it important to teach our kids, and I want to talk about this for a little bit, to manage their emotions and tolerate frustrations? And now, my boys are older, but I do feel like this was an area that I could have done a better job with. And I think mostly because I wasn't doing a great job of managing my own. Like I was deflecting emotion, and it wasn't until I talked to a friend who was a therapist that I was associating emotion with drama. And I never wanted to be a drama queen. I didn't like to be around people that were dramatic. And so for my one child, who is definitely more of an emotional child, he's just being dramatic. And it wasn't until I realized, no, he's just expressing emotion after I had this conversation with my friend that I was like, oh, wow. Like I could have done better. I could have done better. And so for someone who's listening and maybe they feel the same way, and now I know emotion is not drama. I'm not categorizing that anymore. I had to go through a hard lesson in that and really going through some emotional things for me to learn. It's okay to feel. It's okay to cry when you need to cry and sit in your emotion for a little bit. But as the fixer, I just want to keep moving, right? And keep going. But why is it so important for kids this?
Right, exactly. And yeah, everything you said is sort of spot on, right? And so, yeah, it's important to really help our kids to manage their emotions, and that will allow them to better tolerate frustrations. And it is equally important, if not more important, for us to be doing that up front as parents. And so reason is it's going to make it easier for us all to navigate through and beyond challenge when the challenge comes up. Because if we're not consistently managing our emotions and an obstacle comes up and we're up here emotionally, that challenge is going to hit and boom, we're going to escalate to the point of maybe shutting down. And that's not what we want. And we don't want to be modeling that for our children either, right? Because then they're going to think that's sort of, that's how it goes. Challenge is going to shut me down and there's no point in even trying to move through it. So that's why it's really, really important for us to be starting this like really, really early in a developmentally appropriate sort of continuum. So for little kids, we might do some very simple breathing exercises, maybe we might, blow bubbles with them or, help them, imagine their favorite place, whether it's a beach or a swimming pool or an ice cream shop or whatever, and then kind of move it along from there in terms of how we're helping kids to find that sense of inner calm and peace each day on a consistent basis, because the consistency is key. And so with kids, as they get a little bit older, maybe we can do some more, mindfulness-based activities, longer periods of trying to sit with their eyes closed, breathing in and out, that sort of thing. For some kids who are more tactile, more active, more kinetic, that might not work. So we want to find, maybe it's getting them outside for a jog or a run. Maybe it's spending a bit of time in nature, going for a walk with a friend, that sort of thing. The key is there's not a one size fits all. There's not going to be one way to do this for everybody. It's a question of finding what is that activity that helps me to quiet my mind and, be in a more level place consistently.
And I love that because it is a trial and error, because they are, I'm just still so mind blown how different my two boys are. I'm like, you came out of the same place and you're both very different. You're so different. And, there are some that have no problem expressing emotion. And there are some that they do, like you said, kind of shut down or bottle up. And as a parent, when you can recognize both behaviors, and for the one that's like bottling up, you just want to get in there. For me, again, I'm a fixer. So I just want to get in there and force the conversation. Tell me how you're feeling and what you're doing. And that doesn't work well.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't work well. Right. And so
what do you do? What do you do in that situation when they're hurting or they're struggling with something? And honestly, my prayer has always been, I hope they have someone. If it's not me, someone they can talk to about whatever is going on. And I've had to just let go of, it has to be me, or I want it to be me because I'm the mom. I'm not ignorant to think they're going to share everything with me. But how do you, is that what you would suggest? Like you just give them that space and when they're ready, talk, or should you be kind of encouraging it a little more?
Right. And it's a really difficult balance to strike, but I hear you because it's, we have that tendency as moms to want to fix it, to want to jump in, to want to know. And, I too have had to learn to kind of take a little bit of a step back as the boys have gotten older and that sort of thing. But yeah, giving them some space while still sort of letting them know that you're there for them is a really important thing. So it's striking that balance between space, but yet they know that you're there for them. And, maybe trying to create some subtle moments where they, become more comfortable opening up. Sometimes that's, driving home from school. Sometimes that's on a quick walk around the neighborhood if they feel like getting outside or what have you. You can do that spontaneously. Hey, I'm going for a walk. Want to come?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's kind of a thing where you live, but that could be an option. But really, again, not really a one size fits all, but allowing them space while still letting them know in a very clear way that you're there if they need you, if they want to talk, you're there. And that also helps them to internalize this notion of you're really wanting to understand their experience. You're not trying to mold their experience or fix their experience per se, but rather you're trying to understand.
That's cool. That's probably a key word to say to them because I know for me, like a lot of times I don't really want you to fix me. I just want you to listen.
Right. Exactly.
So same thing when in marriage, one of you is trying to fix the other. Like sometimes you just want to be heard.
Right. Exactly.
Get it off your chest, but you don't want someone to come in and say, well, you should do this and this and this and this.
Right. Exactly.
As
Or
a
even
coach.
worse, you need to do this, this, and this, and this. That's even worse. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I need to take that sentence out of my vocabulary. You need to do this. So share with me a little bit more about your experience, as a child and some of the lessons that you learned. I know there's some probably moms listening who do have children with illnesses or have experienced it themselves. Kind of share with us what are some of those lessons that you learned.
Right. Yeah. And so as I mentioned earlier, kind of the condition caused me to be in and out of the hospital a lot in my sort of early years and through adolescence. And, so that meant coming back to school, kind of looking different. My head would be half shaved. I'd have a really weird haircut. I had huge glasses. It just, was challenging. Couldn't do some of the things that my peers could do, like contact sports was sort of out of the question. When all the kids were ice skating, really fun. We did that once a week at recess. I had to wear this huge helmet that folks would kind of like, kids would sort of look and kind of snicker a little bit, and I would be skating along. I was just happy to be out there,
Yeah.
But I think what a lot of these early experiences taught me was first and foremost to really, I came over time, again, not a one size fits all and not a magic answer, but to appreciate my own unique context. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of support around me through parents of friends, to really appreciate my own unique context, really focus in on the things I could do as opposed to the things I couldn't do. And I'm not saying it was always easy by any means, but, that was really, I think, pivotal. I also learned early that it took a little bit more work and perseverance to achieve the same level academically, extracurricularly, or what have you as my peers. But what that meant later on was that I was already accustomed to hard work and overcompensation. And that helped me excel later on. It helped me sort of tread water up front, but in time, it helped me to excel. So that was a really important lesson. Also, couldn't do the contact sports, couldn't do a bunch of the things that the other girls were doing. So my parents kind of figured out that I liked to play tennis. And so we really kind of they helped me foster that early on. And then eventually I was able to take it over myself. So I became a pretty good tennis player. And that became a really important part of my identity in those years, because when things were going well, I was perfectly healthy and fit, and I could do that. And it really became an important piece of my identity. And then lastly, what I'll say is that my parents really took care of the medical challenges when they needed to be addressed, brought me to the doctor. I, had everything, managed. But when things were going well, they didn't define me by the condition I happened to have. They looked at me as the child that I was and had expectations. I had to take out the garbage and clear the dinner table and, just do all of the things that were expected of my brother or anybody else in the family. So that, I think, was very, very important, a very important piece for me.
Yeah. When I've watched documentaries on, topics like this, not specific to that illness, but anything, I've always seen them talk about the parents saying, I want them to feel like a normal child, right?
Yes.
Like I don't want them to be defined by whatever their illness or their diagnosis is. And so, like you said, they do take out the trash and they do clean the dishes. They do try to create as much normalcy as possible. And so I think that's a really good point to bring back up. Like that's not their identity.
Exactly.
But it's probably really easy as the child to feel that way, because even as an adult who just got diagnosed with cancer, it's easy for them to identify now I'm a cancer patient. And instead of I'm still Sally or whatever, her name is.
Yes, precisely.
Helping them to work through this doesn't define you. This is just something that you are going through. It's got to be hard at that age. Like how old were you when you were going?
Well, the hydrocephalus the diagnosis was when I was 4. Okay. And really throughout my adolescence. Yeah, absolutely. And then there were some significant challenges my senior year in high school with it. And I actually, as a result, had to postpone my freshman year of college for a year. So I started college a year late. So it was a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the topics, and this is that I always like to ask every guest, and especially you, as a clinical psychologist of 17 years, is the topic of burnout. This is something that I see a lot with my coaching clients, and being in the industry as a mompreneur for 16 years. It's and not even just this industry. I think for women in general, it's an epidemic, and it's just becoming like, this is just how it is. This is just how we are supposed to operate. Can you speak to a little bit about burnout and anything you can speak to the woman who's on this right now and she's burnout?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Burnout. Yeah. That's a great question because it's real, right? Burnout is real. And as moms, as, mompreneurs or what have you, the tendency is to want to do, add to our lists, and that is a prime recipe for burning out or just getting exhausted, sort of at the core being exhausted. And so it kind of goes back to this idea of managing our stress response, finding ways to cut down on the pile that we're adding to our plates. And it's much, much easier said than done. Yeah. I mean, I experienced the same thing myself. I'm like, oh yeah, I can do that project. And, and really it gets to a point where you need to take a step back and sort of assess the landscape from a broader perspective and really be honest with yourself on kind of where you are in your life right now. What's realistic? What can I take on and accomplish or complete up to my standards? Well, up to my own expectations. And where are the places where I really need to kind of cut back? And understanding as moms our priorities, understanding as moms, where is the support coming from? And asking for help is huge. It's a huge piece, but it really starts with an awareness of our own unique context and how we're going to be positioning ourselves within our own unique context to flourish. And, it's not an easy recipe to create because, our tendency is to want to do, fix. And that's not always possible. And we know it's not good for us.
It's not sustainable.
And it's not sustainable, it's perhaps. Not sustainable. Exactly.
That pace, is not sustainable.
Precisely.
And we all have a different capacity for energy. And
yes.
I think that's the problem is we see, well, this mom is doing all of these things. Well, she may have a really big energy tank and you might have the energy tank of a Volvo, like tiny, and you're trying to do everything she's doing.
Well, exactly. That is such a good point. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about within our own unique context. We want to really be focused on who we are and where we are in our life right now, as opposed to comparing ourselves to that mom who can do 9 million things and make it look easy. Other important piece here is that, it might look easy on the outside, but that mom might be falling apart. We just don't know. So it's really important to try to focus that lens in this way on our own unique experience and context and really try to guard against that, that tendency to want to compare or want to be like our best friend or our next door neighbor or that mom we met at the soccer game or what have you.
Mm-hmm. I read, this has been a few years ago, and I read about like the physical impacts on the brain and how a person in a state of burnout has the same look as someone who's experienced trauma. Mm-hmm. And when I share that with people, they're like, wow, like that's incredible. I'm like, but we walk around in a constant state of burnout. I mean, you think about all of the extremes that we did for the pandemic, and we had extremes, right? Extreme responses. And there's debate whether it was right or wrong, but we did some extreme things to prevent and to heal, the pandemic. But stress is going to kill more people than that ever will.
Exactly.
Because of chronic diseases, but we don't do anything about it. And I think that's where I get fired up. So I'm like, you went to all these extremes. Yeah. You're in a constant state of burnout thinking it's just the way it is.
Right. Because it is true. It's like stress will kill you if you don't take the steps to manage it. And yeah, it's a hard thing to wrap our heads around when we're in it and we want to just keep going. But really taking that step back, carving out that time, for exercise or yoga or meditation or whatever it might be, a phone call with a friend, a walk around the block for a cup of coffee at the local coffee shop, something to sort of shift out of that high intensity space is very, very important.
And like you said, with kids, we have to try different things.
Yes.
It may not be the first thing you try is the one that's going to help you relieve the stress, or it might be a combination of things, but we overcomplicate it. We really feel like, well, if I don't have an hour to exercise and 15 minutes can't do anything. Well, I can tell you as an exercise physiologist, and I know you can.
Oh, yeah.
So this 15 minutes can make a big difference.
Huge difference. Yes, absolutely. And, 15 minutes of a quick walk around the block or walking a mile in 10 minutes, whatever it is. But the key is consistency and finding that thing that resonates with you, where you find that it's making a difference is really key. And that's the thing. People tend to give up, right? Like, oh, well, that didn't work. So forget it. Not possible.
Yeah. Right.
And it's that question of sticking with it and finding that avenue, that thing that clicks with you that's so important.
I also find that moms will say, well, one day, right? That one day that never comes. One day I'll get back to, my yoga, or one day I'll get back to, dating my spouse, or one day. And it's always that one day that never comes. And we've seen the last 3 years, we're not guaranteed another day. None of us are. So
precisely.
Why are we waiting, right? Why are we waiting on that one day instead of taking action today? So
exactly. That is such a good point.
Well, what's exciting right now? What do you have going on that you're super excited about in life or in business? Now that we've talked about burnout and the dread, like let's go to a happy place. What are you most excited about now in the work that you're doing? Or I love that you do the therapy dog. I have a lab. He's sitting right here. You can't see him, but he's sitting. You probably can see him in the mirror back there. But I tell people he's my therapy dog because he's with me in my office. So he helps keep my stress level low, and he makes me walk him. So that helps too.
Yes. He's like, okay, it's time for a walk. Yes. Yeah, no, that's a great question, And so one of the things I am super excited about is my work with Wally out there in the community. And we've been having a great time visiting assisted living facilities. And when he turns 2, he'll be eligible to go to Seattle Children's Hospital. And so that's a goal for us as well. So that's kind of where we're headed with that. And it's a super meaningful process and project that we're working on. So really excited about that. Also excited about the podcast that I started in October. It's called The Optimized Mind.
And I love that.
Essentially looking at, how do we move through and beyond challenge such that we can be at our best within our own unique context. And, having a range of guests on, authors, entrepreneurs, athletes, moms, just all sorts of folks, because I really want to illustrate, that there's not a one size fits all in how we live a resilient life. There's not a one size fits all. Everybody's coming from a different context, a different angle, but that's really what this show is about. And I'm having a great time with it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. When did you launch it?
October.
Okay.
October. Yeah. And it's part of a network, a podcast network called Mission Matters. And there's a range of hosts within the network. And it's a great project. Really enjoying it.
That's awesome. Can they find you is it on Apple Podcasts, on all the podcast listening apps?
It is, yes. Okay. And if you kind of search either Mission Matters Podcast Network or Kate Lund, The Optimized Mind, it will come up.
Awesome. We're going to put all the links to how people can connect with you in the show notes. And then we'll put that on there as well. So this was awesome. If you had to end with just like, what's one thing you would want to make sure all the mompreneurs that are listening should know, what would you want them to know?
Right. So what I would say is challenge is real, but believe in the possibility on the other side of the challenge, both for yourself and for your kids.
Boom. That's great. Love that. I'm going to take that one for sure. Well, thank you so much. This was so awesome. I really enjoyed having you on. I know the listeners are going to probably listen to this one on repeat. You had so many great things to share. So thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your story and your challenges, and also just some helpful tips.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
This was awesome. All right, friends. Well, we'll catch you on the next episode. And I'm believing in you always. Well, that's a wrap, friends, for this week's episode of the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. Thank you so much for listening and for following the show. It means so much to me. And listen, friend, sharing is caring. So if you loved this episode and thought of some fellow mompreneurs who could benefit, send them the link. Share this episode or take a screenshot and head on over to Instagram and share and tag me at Martine31Williams. We are connected on Instagram, right? It's where you will get all the fun behind the scenes of my life and business as a mompreneur. Until next time, know that I am believing in you always.